Prime Ministers, Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this high-level leaders panel where we have the privilege of the presence of President Piñera of Chile and Chancellor Faymann of Austria, Prime Minister Leterme of Belgium, Prime Minister Orbán of Hungary, and Prime Minister Papandreou of Greece. A very, very prestigious panel, a real privilege that will give us the opportunity to share some of the lessons learned from leaders that are governing amidst the worst crisis in a lifetime, and from their specific experiences in what we call riding the storm. A discussion also aimed at considering the way forward. As I highlighted in my presentation of the latest issue of the OECD Economic Outlook this morning, the eye of the economic storm is said to be behind us. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that. The global economic recovery is becoming more firmly established. It is more self-sustained. It is more broad-based. The world economy is projected to grow at around 4.5% on average. But the recovery is at 2 speeds, at least, if not 3. There are important downside risks still. And of course, times are thus extremely challenging for our leaders who are somehow expected to square the circle. They are indeed facing the simultaneous challenges of, number one, taking the decisions to establish a firm recovery. Number two, cracking down on debt and deficits, preventing inflation, making reforms happen, get structural reforms on the way, preparing the future by building the blocks of a more intelligent, innovation-based type of growth, caring for those who have been hit hard by the crisis, the unemployed, particularly the young unemployed. In other words, our political leaders are asked to go frugal, to go structural, to go technological, to go social, all at once, all at the same time. So this is what we want to discuss today with this privileged panel. How are they envisaging these challenges? So we'll give each of the leaders a few minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, to tell us what it is, their opinion and their view of some rather specific issues that we like to know from them. So we'd start with President Piñera. And President Piñera of Chile, why was the impact of the crisis milder in Chile than in many other countries? What are the main challenges that you were facing in a small open economy like Chile, with your own problems, with a very serious earthquake last year? How is it to be dealing with the international context from a country like Chile? What is the way forward? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Angel. Well, the crisis that hit us wasn't milder because we had to face 2 crises. The first one was man-made, the financial crisis. The second one was made by nature because we had to face the 5th worst earthquake in known human history. I think that we were able to face these 2 crises successfully. We had a negative growth rate of 1.5% in 2009, but a positive growth rate in 2010 of more than 5%. Right now we are growing at a 7% pace. Basically, I would say because of 2 things. One is sound economic policies, macro, fiscal, and monetary. And second, because of the strength of our institution. And I would like to emphasize only 3 things. First, we had very strong market stabilizing institution. Not only our independent central bank, but also we have this fiscal rule which forces us by law to save in sunny days in order to be able to use those resources when we have to face rainy days. And that was extremely useful, particularly in 2009 and 2010. The second reason is that we have very strong regulation institutions, like the Security and Exchange Commission, that was able to keep the soundness and strength of our financial system during the whole period. And third, strong legitimizing institution, basically a very strong social network that allowed us to face this crisis united, and therefore to take action that were necessary to be taken, and in a very fast path. With respect to the lesson for the future, our goal is to become, or to overcome underdevelopment and defeat poverty before the end of this decade. And for that, we need to double our growth rate from less than 3%, which was the average of the former government, to more than 6%. And we are achieving that. We have to create 1 million jobs, which represent something like 14% of our labor force in 4 years. Last year, we were able to create 500,000 jobs. And for that, we're implementing a whole package of competitive, pro-competitive measures and growth-friendly measures that really cover the whole scope of the economy. And also, I would say that to finalize, that we have a very strong challenge in terms of increasing the quality of education and training, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship, and investing. We are doubling our investment in science and technology. Those are the three key areas that we have to add to the old pillars of stable economy and macroeconomic equilibrium. So basically, up to now, the Chilean economy is growing again, creating jobs, and we are heading towards this magnificent goal of becoming a developed country without poverty before the end of this decade.
Well, congratulations. Could we give him a round of applause to that? With our best wishes that that ambition will come true. The Prime Minister of Belgium, given the current situation in other countries, you've shown positive results on the side of the deficit, on the employment front in Belgium. Actually, I was telling the Prime Minister that the Germans are credited with the Kurzarbeit initiative, Mr. Pfaffenbach, but actually the ones that have used it more are the Belgians, and I think followed by the Austrians, I have to say. So now, how to account for this good performance, Prime Minister? Could this be sustained if the situation in Europe deteriorates? Is there a European way, or is there a very, very Belgian way?
Well, first, a couple of words, Angela, about Belgium. Of course, we are completely different to Chile. We are a major economy with aging population. That means that the growth figures are more moderate. But I think one first element is that we have very sound fundamentals. We used to say that in Belgium the authorities are poor and the people are rich. The Belgians, as an average, have a very high saving rate, and we have on the accounts we have surpluses, and we have very important surpluses. So it gives the people, it gives the economy stability, it gives quite strong purchasing power. Second element is that our growth, although it is more European size, it's the first trimester of this year, we reached 3% on an annual basis. There is a new outlook of your organization, Angel, telling us that we will have 2.4 on the whole of the year. So this is very important. We have a sound growth. To answer specifically on your question, I think that one of the main tools we used to overcome the way we overcame the crisis was to try to keep the confidence in the labor market. So at the side of the companies, we gave the possibilities to companies to keep their contracts, labor contracts with their people, but putting the costs at the expenses of the public authority. So we paid through the Social Security scheme a very important part of the labor costs in a limited period of time. So through temporary labor market measures. You rightly point out the very specific system of the temporary unemployment scheme, we enlarged the possibilities, we broadened the possibilities. We used to have it on blue-collar workers, we broadened it to white-collar workers, and as a whole it gave us the possibility to keep the, let's say, the relation between the employer and the employee, the worker, and this is very important, and it gives us the result, as a result, that for the first time, I think, since the Second World War, Belgium is overcoming a very important crisis without having an important increase of its unemployment rate. In fact, for the first time, we are below, and very much below, the European average. I think we have 7.9 unemployment rate now. In the Eurozone, I think we are 10.1. So we are, for the first time, below the European average. And for the first time since the Second World War, we don't have that kind of evolution of lowering the unemployment rate, but still higher than before a crisis. And so altogether, I think this kept the confidence in, on the level of the households, the companies. And although Belgium is very much export-oriented, and so depending on, for instance, the German economy, now we see that also the internal markets, the households and the companies are taking over the growth dynamism coming at the beginning of the recovery, coming more specifically from the German market. So I think we are now in a phase where the households and the companies take over this dynamism, and so this is quite promising for the future.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Let me now move on. Prime Minister Papandreou, the so-called sovereign debt crisis of Europe, which is affecting Greece, among other countries, is it a pure result of the financial crisis, or does it have structural some deeper roots? Is there a risk of other countries, including outside Europe, to experience this rapid loss of competitiveness that some of the European countries are seeing? Where do you think this is leading to, and how also is it provoking their very dramatic, very important transformations that Europe is doing because of this debt problem? You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Angel. First of all, it is a Greek responsibility to deal with our own crisis, first and foremost. And I would say that Greece is not a poor country, but it has great potential, but it was a mismanaged country, and that's a question of governance. It's a highly political question. It's a question of structures and institutions. Clientelistic, there was lack of transparency, there was waste, a bloated public sector, inefficient help in growth and competitiveness in areas which were comparative advantages. And we had graft. Even the OECD had a recent, some 2 years ago, I think, study that we could cut out 30% of the costs in hospitals if we cut graft. So I would agree very much with what the Chilean president, Mr. Piñera, said is, a question is, we talk about the symptoms sometimes, which is the debt and the deficit, but the causes are deeper, and they are questions of structures and institutions. I say that because, by chance, there is a report by the Brookings Institute that compares Chile and Greece. And the comparison comes up with one basic conclusion. In Chile, after the dictatorship, they were able to create the strong institutions to regulate, to develop their economy, to create transparency. In Greece, unluckily, we did not do the same. And the Brookings Institute believes that we could save, through structural reforms and transparency, from 4 to 8% GDP every year. Now that is a huge amount, and we would have solved our crisis if, and our debt problem if that was that. That's why, if we had the time, the first thing we would be doing, we're doing that in parallel, of course, would be the structural changes. So we have, and these structural problems had veiled some of the weaknesses because of the euro we're in. We were somewhat, if you like, shielded from seeing these weaknesses. But along with the fiscal adjustment, which we've made impressive achievements, and despite the media hype, because I hear has Greece reached its targets and so on, We have in 1 year reduced 5% of our deficit, 7.2% of our primary deficit. In 2012, we are predicted to be having a primary surplus, and these are done, of course, with very drastic measures we have taken. But this, I think, is an impressive result. But in parallel, we have made major reforms. More transparency, obviously, pension reform, our whole pension system, labor market reform. We followed, as you call it, the Nordic model. More just tax system, which had the sense of injustice, created a culture of tax evasion, and now that is what we're fighting. 150 professions have been liberalized, and we have investing in comparative advantage. We're trying programs to help protect the unemployed and the poor, and in a much more efficient way. And we have a 50 billion program of either privatization or development of public assets. Already after 1 year, we have the first signs of a change, positive growth. In the first quarter, 35% increase in our exports in the last 5-6 months every month on average, which shows that the private sector now is immediately responding. We have increased our competitiveness. We're hoping for a better tourist year, and we're decreasing our inflation. Now, is Greece unique? I would say make two comments here, one wider one on the general and more specific on Europe. When we talk about governance, this was the problem, I believe, in the financial system in 2008, where we had basically fraudulent bonds with AAA status, special vehicles, and a market with quite a herd psychology, where there was a euphoria with a bubble, and it overshot again with fear of every small risk, and that's what we're facing in Greece. Even a small risk shoots the spreads up in the market concerning Greece's possibility for borrowing. We have problems in regulation when we talk about the CDSs, the credit default swaps, huge speculatory pressures, and Greece is also a victim of this, other than its own responsibility. If you add this, the fact that markets today are much quicker than the political systems we work in and the decisions we make, whether it's in our countries or whether it's in the European Union, they are much quicker to respond. Now that may not necessarily be bad, but if they overshadow or even take over the political process, that is a problem for our democracies, and it deeply undermines a sense of confidence of our people. I would say another systematic problem is also something which you also in the OECD deal with, the question of inequality, and that's between inside countries, which also many have written about this, pushed many people to borrow privately, much more than they can afford to keep their standards of living. Tax havens and corruption is part of this inequality, the inability to get the taxes that are being lost, and of course, capturing even of the political system because of this inequality. In the European Union, we have some important systemic questions which we have been dealing with. I think we've made amazing progress in such short time with changing some of the institutions, although it seems the markets are not responding even to that, and that is a question. But we have seen the euro now where we have a common monetary union, but not really an economic union and coordination. You have, for example, spreads going very high in some countries because they're seen as a risk, while other countries are very low, so the borrowing costs are lower in other countries. That, in the short and, of course, in the long run, makes competitiveness very difficult. That creates a spiral, and a spiral of contagion. The governance question, of course, can be dealt with other issues, other challenges. Europe could be much more competitive and much more growth-oriented. There have been a number of proposals, which we like the financial transaction tax, where we could use money for green growth, for education, for investment in infrastructure, and this would be promoting, I would say, a more Nordic model, which I believe is still a very viable model, where you have both competitiveness, high competitiveness, social cohesion, investment in education and quality, and I would say the happiness factor, which I think is one of the factors we should look at, is much higher in these countries. One final point, which, from my experience living in the storm, and I think we still feel the storm, we're still part of the storm in Greece, media and markets and their speed easily dominate, rumors easily dominate the speed of media and markets today. And that goes beyond our political capacity to respond, to digest, to be critical to what, to critically assess what is being said. And this has a daily effect. The fact that every day, every analyst in the world has now become an expert on Greece and is predicting whether we will default or whether we don't need to restructure or whether we should not restructure at all. And this is a daily title in Greek newspapers, of course, which we or on the blogs or on the internet. This is not conducive for the great efforts the Greek people are making, day in, day out. The great, if you like, sacrifices they are making to change their country. So sometimes I say, please leave us in peace. We know we have problems. We're changing Greece. Greece is changing. We will be on track. We will make it. We will do what is necessary. Leave us in peace to be able to do, to bring Greece out of this crisis, and we'll do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Some of you were not here yesterday when President Van Rompuy and I opened the forum, and he had a question about Greece. And he said, listen, I was considered a successful budget minister in Belgium because over 6 years I reduced the budget deficit by 6%, 1% every year. And I'm considered a successful guy there, you know. Well, the Greeks, to put it in perspective, have reduced 6% in 1 year, you know. So I just leave you with that. Now, Prime Minister Orbán, being a rebel and testing the limits of what is possible, I'm actually talking about Hungary, not about him, has often been a characteristic of Hungary's history and policy making. Hungary has been pushing hard for tough reforms, sometimes tougher and in many cases more innovative than other countries. What does it take to make reform happen?
May I just, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and thank you for being called as rebel. That's like music to a Hungarian ear. We are a nation of the freedom fighters, you know, that's a nation of 56, so we are proud of that. And I think that approach could help a little bit just now. Because in our understanding, as we Hungarians understand the situation, we are just not in a crisis. And probably this is a key point which can help us to convince the people that we need changes. So our understanding is that what we are living through now is not a crisis, but a period which leads us to a new period of the European history. So in the Hungarian understanding, the European history was, for some decades, like warfare, Europe, and warfare, economy and societies, even Cold War. Then we got and created the welfare societies and economy. And the Hungarians are convinced that what we need is workfare societies and economies. So that kind of vision is a necessary precondition to gain the support of the people, what you call to run reform. Anyway, the reform language is dead in Hungary. So when somebody in Hungary would like to say that I would like to reform something, you know, it's a political suicide. Because in Hungary, many governments run a lot of reforms in the last 8 years, and we failed. So what the people like is a harsher language. It's not about reform, it's about to reorganize the country. So what we are doing in Hungary, and we try to convince the people, please be involved into that and support that, is not reforms and certain decisions or instruments. What we try to convince about them is that we have to reorganize the whole country. So we introduce a flat tax system. we created a totally new pension system. Then we introduced the 10% small and medium-sized companies taxation level. Then the people...
That's a flat.
That's a flat. Then the people, and the income taxation is based on flat tax anyway, 16%. And then we convinced the people that they have to leave 1 month's salary per year. It's out. 1 month's pension is out. So, and everybody must go back to work from the inactive area. You know, Hungary is suffering a lot because our activity rate is very low. So I'm speaking about workfare society, but the activity rate in Hungary is 55%, one of the lowest in Europe, which is a shame. And the target of the government and the target of the country is that we would like to raise it to 75%. So it means that everybody who went to an early retirement age should consider to come back to work. And the job of the government to provide chance for them. So I think this is the way how we can make the reform happen. So it's not the reform language, it's more than that. It's not about instruments, it's about new age of the history, at least in Europe. And to gain back the credibility, that was the most important thing. You know, the first decision of my government was to reduce by 50% of the numbers of the parliament. Then 50% the number of the seats in the local and the regional councils. And then I asked the bankers, please have a special taxation sharing the burden. And then to have a kind of crisis taxation and to involve the big companies, please, we have to reorganize the country, we need your help. So they were not very much happy of that, of course. You can call it its testing of the limit. But this is the only way when you can create a political credibility for yourself. I'm rather a happy and lucky man, because at the last election, the people were so kind to give us 2/3 majority in the parliament. So when you have 2/3 majority in the parliament, and you have probably the most stable political system in Europe, you can do that job. So reorganize your political and economic system. That's my lesson I have got. So political management is necessary. So without having a strong leadership, you cannot reorganize a country. So to happen reforms, first precondition is political leadership with good political management. Thank you.
So it's very simple. When we write the best practices, the OECD will recommend to all the political leaders, get yourself a 2/3 majority. Then things become a little easier, you know. No coalitions or things like that. Talking about coalitions, Prime Minister Faymann, your predecessor called us in and said, I have this problem with the medical system, with the healthcare system, and I have produced a law and it's not going very well. Could you please come over and help us convince the public in Austria that this is the better way to do it? You know, come in and tell us all the arguments why this is a... And of course, in came the cavalry, you know, the OECD come in, and we created a big seminar, and we gave a lot of speeches, and we told everybody why they had to modify the healthcare system. And then the Prime Minister took it to a vote and lost, and this is why Mr. Faymann is sitting here. So you owe me a drink at least, you know. No, it was not because the OECD didn't do a good job. I think it was a tough one. But it was about health. Austria has also been quite exemplary and is often quoted in our work also about the way that you protect workers, the question of the pensions, the portable workers' rights, etc. How have you mixed fighting the crisis, one of the lowest unemployment rates, and maintaining the social protection network?
Thank you very much for the compliments. But I'm sure that competitiveness is one of the key areas. But how can you improve it? And therefore, I think you need some investments. You need investment in infrastructure. Also during the crisis, we forced our investments there. The second thing is we need to support everything of new technologies, research, and the area of education. to improve the education, to improve research, to have a structure of industry and a good export rate, but also a high percentage of small and middle-sized companies. To do this also during the crisis cost a lot of money, also in Austria. And on the other hand, you have to reach targets of consolidation of the budget. And so I think it's important to discuss topics like Papandreou said, we need also new revenues. Because if we would have the chance to get more of the financial markets, like the financial transaction tax, for example, if we have the chance to get new revenues, then we can do both. We can have reforms and reducing some costs of bureaucracy, but we have enough money to be strong enough in education, research, and these fields. I think this is important to discuss it on a European level, but also discuss it on a global level. Because only the recipe to say it's easy, we have to reduce costs and that everything is getting better, I think this is not enough. We need controlled finance markets against speculation. We have to support middle-sized companies, research, technologies, sustainable business. And therefore you need money to have the possibility to do it in the right way. And if we discuss about the burden on labor, which is already very high, I think it's better to discuss about the introduction of a global financial transaction tax. It's fair, it's socially balanced, and it's a contribution to managing the costs created also by speculation of financial market and the financial market crisis. And it's a question of fairness, credibility. It's a question of fairness, and fairness is important in our society because young people who try to find work, you know that also the unemployment rate of young people is too high in Europe. The latest surveys in Europe show us that the gap between rich and poor is widening. It's not getting closer, it's widening. So we need a lot of fair and social justice and balanced measures for credibility. For example, to define a broad tax base on a very small tax rate about this revenue, if we would have, think about the lowest tax rate of 0.01% estimated revenues, we would have an amount of 200 to 250 billion only in the European Union. It's important money for green technologies, for other very important tasks we have. And I think to manage these social challenges is very important because we are responsible for ensuring also social balance and welfare. This should be typical. To think about this balance. And so we have not only discussed about rules and strict rules for the finance market, we also have to discuss about responsible and sustainable high-quality energy policy. This is the other side of the same coin because it's also necessary to have sustainability. And if we discuss about sustainability, I only will discuss about one very interesting point of the IPCC. They said that renewable energy sources could provide up to 77% of the world's energy needs by 2050. And further investment in clean technologies will not only foster competitiveness, but could at the same time boost employment and development. and to boost employment and to have a low rate of unemployment, I think this is an important task for all of us.
Thank you very much, Minister. We owe President Piñera a minute, maybe a minute and a half. He's the one who came from furthest and was very, very succinct. So let me close the panel, after which I will ask the leaders to move to sit in the respective seats where their flags are. But before we close, let me ask President Piñera to tell us what keeps you awake at night. Very fast.
A dream, but not only a dream, because the difference between a dream and a target is when you set a date. And we have only this decade to overcome underdevelopment and poverty, which have been with us for the first 200 years of our independent lives. That keeps me awake at day and almost all night.
Let's give the leaders our appreciation, please.